Collins on insider trading charges. Since 2013, the Republican has represented the state's 27th district, which includes the suburbs of Rochester and Buffalo. He was one of President Trump's earliest backers in Congress. Congressman Collins denying any wrongdoing, his attorneys issuing a statement saying they will defend the charges vigorously in court and they expect him to be exonerated. Brian Yanis has more from our New York City newsroom. Brian.
Hi, Melissa. Well, New York Republican Representative Chris Collins surrendered to the FBI around 7 a.m. this morning. The congressman is being charged with federal insider trading related to an Australian biotechnology company called Innate Immunotherapeutics Limited. Representative Collins served on the company's board of directors. His son, Cameron Collins, and the father of Cameron's fiancee, Stephen Zarsky, also face insider trading charges. Now, according to the indictment, this all began around June 2017. The company was developing a drug to treat a form of multiple sclerosis. Prosecutors allege that Representative Collins knew the drug failed trials 5 days before that news became public. They know this because Collins received an email from the CEO while at a congressional picnic at the White House telling him that. Collins then shared this information with his son and others, who then traded the company's stock with that insider information. Once news of the drug trial failure became public and the company's stock plummeted 92%. Prosecutors say the information Collins provided saved 8 men over $768,000 in losses. In a statement, Collins' lawyer says, quote, "It is notable that even the government does not allege that Congressman Collins traded a single share of Innate Therapeutics stock. We are confident he will be completely vindicated and exonerated." Also, a statement here from House Speaker Paul Ryan. Quote, "While his guilt or innocence is a question for the courts to settle, the allegations against Representative Collins demand a prompt and thorough investigation by the House Ethics Committee. Insider trading is a clear violation of the public trust. Until this matter is settled, Representative Collins will not be serving on the House Energy and Commerce Committee." Now, prosecutors say it's true Mr. Collins lost millions of dollars in stock. But they argue the only reason the representative did not make trades himself, Melissa, was because his stock was held up in the Australian stock market. He technically just could not. Also, he was under investigation by the Congressional Ethics Committee at the time for similar accusations. Mr. Collins, by the way, is considered the 13th wealthiest member of Congress, worth $44 million, according to roll call. And Congressman Collins is expected to be in federal court today at 2:30.
So, Brian, I just want to clarify, because that's a really interesting detail. He learned that the drug failed the trial through an email from the CEO, not as a result of his government job. And, you know, he heard it from someone in where the testing was going on, the Food and Drug Administration or whatever. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's a fact. Yeah, according to the indictment, he learned about this, or he was at the congressional picnic from the CEO of the company, who said, "We've got terrible news. This drug has failed." And it was just within minutes of that they have a log of phone calls in which Representative Collins immediately began to call his son about 6 times, trying to alert his son, according to the indictment, that the drug had failed. And the next morning, prosecutors say his son began to move and to trade based on that information. And again, it wasn't until 5 days later that this news became public and that stock plummeted 92%.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. And as we said before, if you look at the screen there, we are waiting for this news conference to begin any second. And in the meantime, let's just talk a little bit about what we just heard. Josh, I assume that he found out through his government job. It's interesting. Looks like plain vanilla.
Nope, maybe not.
Insider trading. I think it's going to start in about 2 minutes here if you stick with us here in the office. If you stick with us here on the couch as we watch the podium. Josh Holmes is with us. Josh, this sounds like classic insider trading, where a board member finds out and then lets other people know so that they can trade on the information. They're going to have to prove that he called his son 6 times, what transpired in that conversation. I wonder if it's enough just if the Sun traded on it the next day.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a nexus to his congressional job, as you pointed out, but it doesn't make it any better.
Oh, no. It doesn't make it any, it's just, an interesting fact, because normally you would make the point, or I would make the point, that nobody in Congress should be on the board of any public company, because the temptation is to influence or to share what the temptation's just too great. But apparently that had nothing to do with this.
You're absolutely right. And I worked for a number of different senators, and I always provided a guidance on this to just go beyond reproach.
Just don't do it.
You're going to end up losing money, but that's okay. You decided to serve your country in the capacity as a congressman, and it is far better to eliminate all potential problems by divesting of yourself in all of these areas and be able to just clean up on your own finances. So this is obviously a real problem for House Republicans.
If people are just tuning in right now and they're wondering what's on the left side of their screen, Representative Chris Collins of New York is expected to make a statement. You see people filing into this venue where they will be hearing from him, federal prosecutors rather, about Representative Chris Collins and these charges against him.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Furman, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Today, we announce criminal charges against Christopher Collins, a United States Congressman. Congressman Collins is charged with insider trading and lying to the FBI. As alleged in the indictment, Congressman Collins cheated our markets and our justice system in two ways. First, he tipped his son to confidential corporate information at the expense of regular investors, and then he lied about it to law enforcement to cover it up. Also charged is his son, Cameron Collins, and Stephen Zarsky, the father of Cameron's fiancée. These charges are a reminder that this is a nation of laws and that everybody stands equal before the bar of justice. Now I'd like to go into the details of the allegations a little more. In addition to serving in the House of Representatives, Congressman Collins was also on the board of directors of Innate Immunotherapeutics, a publicly traded company that was developing a drug for multiple sclerosis. In June of 2017, Congressman Collins was told some confidential and highly sensitive information about Innate, information that was not yet made public, namely that Innate's main drug, the drug Innate was developing to be the backbone of its company, was a total failure. This was devastating information for the company. Congressman Collins had an obligation, a legal duty, to keep that information secret until that information was released by the company to the public. But he didn't keep it secret. Instead, as alleged, he decided to commit a crime. He placed his family and friends above the public good. Congressman Collins was a major investor in Innate, and so was his son Cameron. The congressman knew he couldn't sell his own shares for personal and technical reasons, including that he was already under an investigation regarding Innate by the Congressional Ethics Office. The crime that he committed was to tip his son Cameron so that Cameron and a few select others could trade on the news while the investing public remained in the dark. As the indictment alleges, that's exactly what they did. His son Cameron sold. Cameron's fiancée sold. The father of the fiancée, Zarsky, sold. Mr. Zarsky's wife sold. Other friends and relatives sold. And all because Congressman Collins violated his duty to keep Innate's information secret. And when the news of the drug's failure became public, the stock plummeted. In total, the conspirators used the inside information to avoid over $750,000 in losses. But Congressman Collins couldn't keep his crime a secret forever. The FBI asked to interview him, and instead of telling the truth, he lied. And so did Cameron Collins, and so did Stephen Zarsky. By lying to the FBI, they compounded their insider trading crime with the crime of criminal cover-up. Now I'd like to go over to these two charts which summarize some of the allegations in the indictment. This first chart is a tipping chain. It demonstrates the flow of the illegal insider information and the trading, the illegal trading of that information. At the top of the chain is Congressman Collins. He had an obligation as a Nate board member when he received confidential corporate information to keep that information secret until the company announced it to the public. In total disregard of that obligation, minutes after Congressman Collins received the devastating, highly confidential news that Nate's drug had failed its drug trial, Congressman Collins tipped that inside information to his son so that his son could trade. Cameron Collins, when he received that illegal inside information, he did two things, both of which are illegal. He sold stock based on that inside information and avoided $570,000 in losses. And he also took that illegal inside information and tipped others. He tipped his fiancée. He tipped his fiancée's wife. He tipped his fiancée's father, and he tipped a friend, all of whom traded on that illegal inside information. Stephen Zarsky, his fiancée's father, avoided $143,000 in losses by trading on that information, and he tipped others. He tipped his brother, he tipped his sister, and he tipped a friend, two of whom traded on the information. One attempted to trade on the information, but was unable. In total, the conspirators avoided losses of over $768,000, all because of the initial illegal insider trading tip by Congressman Collins. In this chart, we set some of the key allegations in the indictment against a timeline, a backdrop of the innate share price. On the evening of June 22nd, 2017, Congressman Collins was at a congressional picnic, and at 6:55 he received an email from the CEO of Innate informing him of the horrendous news that the drug had failed its trial. At 7:10 p.m., Congressman Collins responded to that email. So as the indictment alleges, at least at 7:10 p.m., Congressman Collins was aware of the inside information. A minute later, Congressman Collins attempts to call his son. In a period of 5 minutes, there are 6 unsuccessful calls. On the 7th call, at 7:16 p.m., as alleged in the indictment, Congressman Collins illegally tips his son Cameron about the drug trial results so that his son Cameron could trade on those results. Later that evening, on June 22nd, after Cameron Collins has the illegal insider trading information, Cameron Collins drives with his fiancée to his fiancée's parents' house. They arrive at the house at 9:17 p.m. less than 20 minutes later, at 9:34 p.m., the fiance's mother is on the phone with her broker, beginning the process of selling her shares of Innate. The next morning, on June 23rd, at 7:42 a.m., Cameron Collins begins the process of selling his shares of Innate. During June 23rd and June 26th, Cameron Collins sells approximately 1.39 million shares of Innate prior to the market close of June 26. After the market closes, Innate announces to the public that its drug had failed the trial. And the next day, the drug price, the price of Innate, falls off a cliff. It drops 92% in value in a single day. This was the drop that was anticipated by the co-conspirators. This was the drop in value that the co-conspirators avoided by selling their shares before the public announcement, and they could only sell those shares by virtue of the initial tip of inside information by Congressman Collins. A case of this type and significance obviously involves the SEC and the FBI, and their representatives are standing up here with me today. To my left is my good friend Bill Sweeney, the Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's New York field office. And to the far left is John Brosnan, the Special Agent in charge of the FBI New York office Criminal Division. The FBI's work on this case was spectacular, and I want to thank them for their professionalism and dedication. We work with the FBI on so many important cases, and it is always a privilege. To the left of Bill is Stephanie Avakian and Steve Pekin, who are co-directors of the SEC's Division of Enforcement. I want to thank them and the SEC for their hard work on this matter. Last, I want to acknowledge and thank the career prosecutors in my office handling the case. To my right is Max Nicholas, Damian Williams, Bob Allen, Scott Hartman, and the co-chiefs of our Securities and Commodities Fraud Task Force, Tim Kasoulas and Jason Cowan. Congressman Collins, who by virtue of his office helps to write the laws of our nation, acted as if the law didn't apply to him. The charges today demonstrate once again that no matter what the crime and no matter who committed it, we stand committed in the pursuit of justice without fear or favor. I would now like to invite to the podium Bill Sweeney.
Okay, so that was the U.S. Attorney from the Southern District of New York, and he was explaining the case against Congressman Chris Collins, who is a Republican from New York, who has now been charged with insider trading, both tipping and then also lying to the FBI. He was on the board of a company called Innate that had a single drug, and it was an MS drug. He found out as a board member through an email from the CEO that it had failed its drug trial. It is then alleged that he tipped off his son, and the chain of events went on from there. Josh, I want to ask you, because they showed you how they're going to lay out the case, because you can never know what happened on a phone call. And he tried with that chain of events and what happened afterwards to make it so that a jury would conclude that it had to be that he told the son what had happened there, and that then the tipping went on from there, and he went on to lie to the FBI. With the Martha Stewart's a case everybody's familiar with, most people are familiar with. She was in the end found guilty of lying to the FBI. They couldn't prove what was on the phone call. The essential thing here is that seat in New York City. So as a politician, we heard Jason Chaffetz say in the last hour that he should step down immediately, guilty or innocent, so that seat, there's time to do what? Tell me what would happen.
Well, look, this has not been a seat that Democrats have targeted. It is seen as sort of a safe seat. Collins was not presumed to be any sort of danger up to this point.
Right.
And so I think the question here is whether or not he stays or whether he goes. Now, clearly he's afforded the presumption of innocence, but the court of public opinion is going all the time, right? And we're getting pretty close to midterm elections here.
So Republicans might want him to bow out so they would have time to get someone else in there who could possibly run against the Democrat rather than leave him in place and have him.
There will be a process that New York Republicans will be able to replace him on the ballot. The question is whether you have ballot access at this point and you get ballots printed. So it's a little complicated at this point.
All right, up next, we're going to talk about the dead heat races in Ohio and Kansas, what they say about the midterms and the president's influence. We'll debate.
The battleground state of Ohio at the center stage now ahead of the midterm elections. It's the 90-day point today, by the way, people. This is it. This is the lead up. Last night's special congressional election remains too close to call in Ohio. Republican Troy Balderson, backed by President Trump, is leading Democrat Danny O'Connor by less than 1 percentage point in the 12th district. Balderson already declaring victory in that race last night, but his opponent, Danny O'Connor, has not conceded. Both of them last night.
I'm going to promise to you that I'm going to work relentlessly for this 12th congressional district. America is on the right path, and we're going to keep it going that way.
We are fighting for a better America. We went door to door. We went house to house. We made our case for change. We're going to make that case tomorrow. We're not stopping now.
President Trump already tweeting his congratulations, saying, quote, "When I decided to go to Ohio for Troy Balderson, he was down in early voting, 64-36. That was not good. After my speech on Saturday night, there was a big turn for the better." Now, Troy wins a great victory during a very tough time of the year for voting. He will win in November. Meanwhile, another dead heat, this one in Kansas, Republican primary for governor, Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who President Trump endorsed now with a razor-thin lead over the incumbent governor, Jeff Collier. Kobach calling on Republicans to unite no matter who wins. Watch it.
This has been a very tough scrimmage between the two sides, or between really the five sides. But I want everybody to join together regardless, stand for the principles that we all believe in, and come together quickly and effectively so that we can advance our Republican principles against the Democrat and the Independent in November.
A lot of breaking news this hour so fast. I want to get to everybody. So let's have a quick lightning round. Morgan?
I think what's fascinating about last night in general is President Trump is again doing something that's completely unorthodox, which he's endorsing in primaries. I mean, typically sitting presidents don't do it. And I think this president has shown that he's going to remake this party in his image. He now has 85 to 90% of Republican support. And when he's weighing in these primaries and in these races around the country, I think he's doing it to make the point that this is my party and the candidates that go forward in November will reflect me.
Jessica, interesting to watch last night. The leads kind of dissolved. It looked like Democrats were going to start to do better, and then they didn't.
I felt good at like 8:10, and then I felt less good. As 9 p.m. rolled around, I was shooting Kennedy, and I was like, yeah, and then I was like, but, you know, there was a lot, if you were listening to the cable news punditry last night about the race that Danny O'Connor won and what a moral victory this is for Democrats. Yeah, we shouldn't have even been in that race. That's a Republican seat, ruby red, as you would say. Moral victories aren't as fun as real victories, but those two will be rematching come November. I thought what was also going on in Michigan was fascinating. There was a lot of, you know, the Bernie contingent against the mainstream Dem contingent, and they swept through the heartland in Michigan and Kansas. The moderate Democrats did. So that's something to be following as this kind of progressive versus the mainstream of the wing tension heats up. The mainstream seems to be.
Real quickly with some facts to set you up, Josh, in Ohio. So there were about 1,754, so 1,754 votes between the Democrat and the Republican in Ohio. There's some provisional ballots to count. Not likely that that would necessarily tip it, but it might put it in that 0.5% difference zone for a recount. You've been down this road getting ready to flip a house, 2014. Talk to me.
Well, look, I mean, this is an important election just for momentum purposes because you're, again, 90 days away from the election. The reality is that the congressman who is elected is going to serve effectively for about 45 days, right? So in terms of policy, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference other than the perception of what's going to happen in the upcoming midterm. Look, Republicans have held this seat for a long time, and I think Democrats are going to say that what we're looking at here is indicative of a wave that's coming. In some ways that may be true, but there are three things that Republicans had in this district that made unique vulnerabilities. One, a lot of suburban voters. Republicans have a problem with suburban voters. Two, Democrat enthusiasm. We've seen it everywhere. They had it in that district. And three was a vacancy. And all vacancies are very difficult to defend. This district had all three. I'm not surprised in the least that it was close. I think Republicans actually did a really good job to get through it.
They did have one fourth thing, though. Donald Trump, the president.
I mean, I think that what we really saw was engagement on all sides, and that's an exciting thing to see right now. And you can look at it like we're a country divided and we're at each other's throats, or you can look at it like we're a country that's engaged, that's thinking about politics, that's getting involved, that's going out and backing the candidates that they favor. And I'm going to choose to be positive about this and look at the engagement. I'm sick of the fighting.
Well, I said at the end of overtime, just go vote.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that's, I mean, we have fought in this country. We've done so much just to get to the polls. Let's go show the rest of the world how we do it.
Absolutely.
Democracy. Another explosive day in the Paul Manafort trial. After bombshell testimony from his top aide, Rick Gates, Manafort's attorneys hammering his credibility on cross-examination. Did the jurors believe him? Stay close. Our top aide of Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, is wrapping up his testimony after taking the stand for day number 3 in the fraud trial of his former boss. Gates told the courtroom he has, quote, no doubt the government would rip up his plea agreement if he doesn't tell the truth. After bombshell testimony from Gates yesterday, where he revealed he helped Paul Manafort evade taxes and land loans from banks by doctoring records, and that he embezzled $3 million from Manafort. Wow, he stole from him, too. The defense team hammered away at his credibility, repeatedly bringing up his extramarital relationship. There was only one? Wow.
I think one, a little Paul Manafort financed.
It had some for everybody. But, you know, you talk about the credibility, and criminals, ratting on criminals is actually something that juries typically believe.
Well, there's no honor amongst thieves, right?
Apparently.
Wow.
Not at all.
That's what we're learning here. Yeah, I mean, this is about as bad as it gets. We're learning.
For them, the judge said nothing about that former campaign chairman of Trump can enter this trial. And I've had experts tell me, including Judge Napolitano on this expert, it shouldn't because they don't have anything to do with each other.
That's right. I actually think from the perspective of President Trump and this ongoing Russia investigation, this entire trial is good news because what we've seen is the people who are closest to him during the campaign who had the Russia connections are the ones who the FBI has spent the last year and a half going through their underwear drawer, finding every single thing about it. And what they brought was zero charges related to Russian collusion, a whole host of charges related to things that they did before they ever met President Trump. And so, I mean, if I am in the Trump defense camp, I'm looking at this like, well, I mean, if this is what Mueller has, how are we still talking about this?
Morgan?
For me, from a national security perspective, what was so interesting about learning about Manafort's lavish lifestyle, and then, of course, getting in debt and having to lie, cheat, and steal to keep up that lavish lifestyle, this is like Russian espionage 101. Like, they saw him, and they were like, this is exactly who we're going for. He's in debt a ton. He's got to keep up airs around Washington. He's got money around the world. So in terms of being an intelligence target, it's no surprise to me from reading this and hearing the trial why the Russians honed in on him.
Well, and I also think it's interesting. You talk about the president looking for loyalty. Look at the person who was close to him on his campaign. That person couldn't have been more of a friend and said, you know what? I know you need me right now, but I got all this stuff going on with an investigation. I mean, I realize it's up to the FBI to stand up and do that sort of thing, but I do think it's interesting that he didn't do that for a friend.
There's a lot of confusing things about the character of these people who were closely involved with the Trump campaign at some point. You are right. At this moment, this is not about what went on there. I know that questions have been raised as to, you know, Paul Manafort worked for free for President Trump to handle the brokered convention. And I've seen some issues raised about what he then went on to do and whether he made connections during that then led to business deals that he would not have had otherwise.
Well, why else would you do it for free?
Right.
No, No, but whether that with Russians and whether that related back to information then relating to the collusion narrative there. But we have nothing of that.
We would have heard about that by now.
I read that that's what they're going to be looking at as this keeps going, what happened with Paul Manafort.
Well, that's the
and
pressure
after.
point that they're hoping to squeeze Paul Manafort with.
Right.
But I counted 7 or so, like, ifs and proclamations of what if and all of that. That's a long ways away from where the facts are.
Oh, totally. I mean, the facts right now are about Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. Rick Gates needs to save himself, and this is what he promised them, that he would cooperate.
What I
and
think
would
is, as they lay out all this stuff that has gone on over time, I hear back to Peter Strzok's own statement when he said that any candidate who had this kind of a thing going on in their campaign would want to know.
Yeah.
And my response at that time, and he was being questioned by a Democrat in front of Congress, so they didn't ask the obvious question, so why didn't you tell him?
Exactly. That's what I said.
This is all going on. Why did no one go in and say to the campaign, do you know that this is who these people are that you're doing business with? I guess because they were hoping against hope that there was some sort of connection there that they haven't shown. I mean, he said any candidate would want to know. So tell them.
And that's what I said when I said it
Why didn't
would
they
be
tell them?
in the role and the lane, if you will, of the FBI standing up and doing it.
Yeah, the FBI has failed, I think, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's campaigns in a number of different ways. And we've discussed that a number of times. But if you are running a legitimate campaign outfit, and we've discussed this before, and we're even joking that you can just Google Paul Manafort and you will find out everything you need to know about him and why you shouldn't hire him.
Not this stuff that they're bringing out in court.
Yeah, this is insidious. I mean, you had to have one rat on the other. We got to move on, but I'm sure it'll come back up.
Yes.
Progressive Democrats' efforts to move the party left. Oh, look, right back to you, Jessica. Failing last night in Michigan's primary for governor, despite the backing from liberals like Senator Bernie Sanders and, the up-and-comer here in New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. An upstart progressive candidate was soundly defeated by an establishment-backed candidate. Can Democrats mend the divide? Do they need to try?
Fox News alert, progressive Democrats push to move the party to the left dealt a major blow last night in Michigan's Democratic primary race for governor. Upstart progressive Abdul Al-Sayed was soundly defeated by the establishment-backed former Michigan lawmaker Gretchen Whitmer. This despite numerous public endorsements and campaign appearances from liberal firebrands like Senator Bernie Sanders and New York congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Jessica, I'll start with you. What did you think of all this?
I thought it was interesting to see it unfold. It was where a lot of us who occupy the center of the party thought that things were going, and we're really up against a narrative about the strength of the Dem socialist wing of the party that is inaccurate. If you look in Michigan and you look at what happened in Kansas, all of the Bernie-backed candidates went down, and in Michigan went down by over 20 points. It was obviously closer in Kansas. They had 5 people on the ballot there. It's a very dangerous thing that's going on. We got split in 2016, and Hillary resoundingly won 4 million votes in the primary there, but we can lose seats that we should be able to pick up. The Cook Political Report says there are 60 seats kind of up for grabs right now. And if we have Dem on Dem, hate crimes, you could lose a few that maybe we could take on just in the messaging now. We're going to have our candidates. But if there are progressives on TV saying, oh, the Democrat and the Republican are the same, like they did about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, you could end up with Trumps all over the place.
Josh, so the flip side of that is you look at somebody like Ocasio-Cortez says, well, if you look at places like New Jersey, it was, Menendez was given a real run for his money by somebody who had no money and, basically had no power. And she, made a lot of headway.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jessica's right in that Democrats dodged a real bullet last night. I mean, I think that they are dangerously close to being defined by this more radical wing in the Democratic Party. You see people, liberal icons like Dianne Feinstein in California, who failed to even get the nomination of her party. I mean, this is somebody who has basically been, the end-all, be-all in liberal governance for the last 30 years for Democrats, and now she is not liberal enough. And so, they did dodge a bullet here, but I don't think this is universal. I I think this is a problem. All of the energy in the Democratic Party is in this socialist, anti-ICE, impeach the president, repeal the tax cuts, and more Obamacare wing. And, you know, if they keep that up, they're never going to win the Midwest ever again.
But how did the mainstream Democrats win then if all the enthusiasm is with the progressives?
Well, look, having worn these shoes on the Republican feet 6 years ago, I can tell you it's a constant battle. When we fought it with Republicans, sort of the uncompromising Republican wing, we saw in 10 and 12 and 14, these candidates emerged that couldn't win general elections.
Right.
Right. And so, and we won some, and we lost some. Ultimately, the Republican Party.
2010, you won a lot.
Ultimately, the Republican Party put that behind them, and we're able to elect more general election friendly candidates. But I think Democrats are at the nascent stage of this. I really think that Democrats are beginning, and we'll see it in 2020 play out on the big stage in the presidential campaign. I'm afraid what you're looking at is going to be a race to the left, the likes of which we've never seen before.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think, you know, we could have 20 people running for the Democrat nomination. What's important in Michigan, not just having Bernie and Alexandria endorse them, is, you know, Linda Sarsour, who is a bigot, a racist, and an anti-Semite, endorsed the candidate that they supported, Abdullah Syed, and he bragged about it. I mean, it wasn't like she just endorsed and he sort of ignored it. He bragged about having her endorsement. If the Democrat Party is headed towards abolishing ICE and embracing Linda Sarsour and embracing socialism, it's not only dangerous for the Democrat Party, it's dangerous for America.
I agree with you there, and this also loops into a conversation about Louis Farrakhan and the founders of the Women's March, who have been vehemently anti-Israel, which is not our position. It is a progressive, far-left position that the Democratic Party will not take, and I totally agree with you that it's dangerous.
Well, you don't want to take it.
Right.
You almost nominated somebody to be DNC chair last time around that held exactly
Well, we didn't
those
almost,
positions.
and that was Tom Perez's
New developments when it comes to James Comey and the Justice Department, what a federal judge just ordered done with the former FBI chief's private email, and what it means going forward. Fox News alert, progressive Democrats push to move the party to the left dealt a major blow last night in Michigan's Democratic primary race for governor. Upstart progressive Abdul Al-Sayed was soundly defeated by the establishment-backed former Michigan lawmaker Gretchen Whitmer. This despite numerous public endorsements and campaign appearances from liberal firebrands like Senator Bernie Sanders and New York congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Jessica, I'll start with you. What do you think of all this?
I thought it was interesting to see it unfold. It was where a lot of us who occupy the center of the party thought that things were going, and we're really up against a narrative about the strength of the Dem socialist wing of the party that is inaccurate. If you look in Michigan and you look at what happened in Kansas, all of the Bernie-backed candidates went down, and in Michigan went down by over 20 points. It was obviously closer in Kansas. They had 5 people on the ballot there. It's a very dangerous thing that's going on. We got split in 2016, and Hillary resoundingly won 4 million votes in the primary there, but we can lose seats that we should be able to pick up. The Cook political report says there are 60 seats kind of up for grabs right now. And if we have Dem on Dem, hate crimes, you could lose a few that maybe we could take on just in the messaging now. We're going to have our candidates. But if there are progressives on TV saying, oh, the Democrat and the Republican are the same, like they did about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, you could end up with Trumps all over the place.
Josh, so the flip side of that is you look at somebody like Ocasio-Cortez says, well, if you look at places like New Jersey, it was, Menendez was given a real run for his money by somebody who had no money and, basically had no power. And she, made a lot of headway.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jessica's right in that Democrats dodged a real bullet last night. I mean, I think that they are dangerously close to being defined by this more radical wing in the Democratic Party. You see people, liberal icons like Dianne Feinstein in California, who failed to even get the nomination of her party. I mean, this is somebody who has basically been, the end-all, be-all in liberal governance for the last 30 years for Democrats, and now she is not liberal enough. And so, they did dodge a bullet here, but I don't think this is universal. I think this is a problem. All of the energy in the Democratic Party is in this socialist, anti-ICE, impeach the president, repeal the tax cuts, and more Obamacare wing. And, if they keep that up, they're never going to win the Midwest ever again.
But how did the mainstream Democrats win then if all the enthusiasm is with the progressives?
Well, look, having worn these shoes on the Republican feet 6 years ago, I can tell you it's a constant battle. When we fought it with Republicans, sort of the uncompromising Republican wing, we saw in 10 and 12 and 14, these candidates emerged that couldn't win general elections.
Right.
Right. And so, and we won some, and we lost some. Ultimately, the Republican Party.
2010, you won a lot.
Ultimately, the Republican Party put that behind them, and we're able to elect more general election friendly candidates. But I think Democrats are at the nascent stage of this. I really think that Democrats are beginning, and we'll see it in 2020 play out on the big stage in the presidential campaign. I'm afraid what you're looking at is going to be a race to the left, the likes of which we've never seen before.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think, we could have 20 people running for the Democrat nomination. What's important in Michigan, not just having Bernie and Alexandria endorse them, is, Linda Sazor, who is a bigot, a racist, and an anti-Semite, endorsed the candidate that they supported, Abdullah Syed, and he bragged about it. I mean, it wasn't like she just endorsed and he sort of ignored it. He bragged about having